This is One on One. Dr. Ana Luz Porzecanski is co-curator of the Cuba Exhibit, American Museum of Natural History. How are you, Doctor?
I'm terrific.
It's so good to have you, Ana.
It's great to be here.
Talk about this Cuba exhibit and why it's so important.
Oh, I think it's just the first time that Cuba has been seen in this way in this country, really. It's about nature and culture of Cuba. And I think it's for people from any age, you know, all families, everybody. I think everybody will find something interesting to learn there.
We're going to be showing some videos, some pictures from the exhibit, but I'm going to ask you this. What's the biggest misconception you think most of us in the New York, New Jersey, this region have about Cuba?
Oh, gosh, there are many, I would say.
That's why I asked.
I think, you know, there were a couple of things. There were three key things, I think, in terms of misconceptions that we wanted this exhibit to dispel, perhaps. The first one, Cuba is very large and it's very close. And because it's so large, it's actually really diverse and has a lot of environmental variety. And there comes the second. It is biologically completely unique. It's like the Madagascar of the Caribbean. It has all these things that are found in Cuba and nowhere else, and people don't know about them. And the third one is that the Cuban people are, you know, diverse as well. There's diversity of voices in Cuba, and we show that through the exhibit.
So, you know, as we do this program at the end of 2016, it will be seen after, Fidel Castro, his passing.
Yes.
Means what to Cuba and about Cuba?
Well, that's not really my area of expertise, as you know. The museum
What about
is
the culture, let's say?
the culture. Well, I think, you know, it is definitely a watershed moment for Cubans. They've lived with this leader for their lifetimes, and so I do think it's a watershed moment. They knew he was aging, but it's not the same, and so we shall see. But I think they've also been preparing for this for a long time.
Clearly, the scientific collaboration.
Yes.
Between the United States and Cuba. It's been going on for years, in spite of the political
Yes. You know,
issues.
In particular, our museum has had a very long collaboration
Talk about that.
with Cuban scientists, over 100 years. And, you know, our first joint expedition with Cuban scientists in Cuba was 1892. And there's been, on average, about one every 3 years. So we've been working together despite the political climate.
Hasn't changed it.
Well, you know, there were it ebbed and flowed. There were times when there was more activity. There were times when there was less. But there's been really landmark collaborations in geology, paleontology, biology, you name it. Birds, spiders, lizards, you know, jade, incredible extinct animals that were discovered together, looking for rare animals today, including the amazing expedition we did last year. Just last year, I was one of the leaders of that, and we spent several weeks in the field in eastern Cuba in Humboldt National Park, and it was a real collaboration between our museum, the American Museum of Natural History, the National Museum of Natural History of Cuba, and Humboldt National Park.
Looking to achieve what?
We were looking to understand better what is in this park because it has not been that explored, believe it or not. We think we found a number of new species just in 4 weeks in the field.
So interesting. For those of us who are not trained in the field that you are trained in and understand the significance of this, what is the significance of it?
Of discovering new species, for
Yes.
example? Well, you know, in order to protect...
Particularly in Cuba.
Yes. Well, I think that in order to protect and sustain the environment that really makes our life possible, we also need to know what is there. We need to understand it. And so it's very hard to protect what you don't know. And so I think discovery goes, you know, alongside with conservation.
Your background?
I'm from Uruguay, South America, originally. Grew up there and in Brazil, did my undergrad there in biology. In fact, I was just interviewed for Uruguayan radio yesterday, the other day, so they're excited that, you know, that I'm behind this, this exhibit. Moved here following my career and my heart, because I had fallen in love with an American man, and who is now my husband. And I've been here 20 years.
Talk us through the exhibit. Exactly what will people see?
People will, I think, be very surprised. There'll be some of the things they expect, but they are used as entry points. For instance, we have a 1955 Chevy in the exhibition. You know, some people would say, well, that's a cliche. Well, it is and it isn't, because why are there so many old cars in Cuba?
Why is that?
It's a complicated story. It's a combination between restrictions that were imposed by the Cuban new revolutionary government at the time. Castro famously said we need tractors, not Cadillacs, but also a result of the American embargo that has lasted all these years, meaning there haven't been new parts that have been able to come into Cuba. And so what was there then, it's still today, and because of the ingenuity of Cubans, continues to circulate. And so as visitors come in, they'll be confronted with some of these elements. They'll see a remarkable recreated boulevard as if you were on a Cuban street. And from there, they'll be able to explore in greater depth both the nature and the culture of Cuba and also how they connect.
But not political. Because I'm thinking to myself, when you show this Chevy, and we should do a game called All Roads Lead to the Godfather, because there's a scene in the Godfather. Yes. There really is.
I know, my husband's a huge fan. He watches
well, because there's a
the
scene
time.
where Batista is being thrown out, and the revolution is starting, and the mob is in Cuba, and they were convinced that American business would thrive. And Batista had this close relationship with American business and the mob, and everything changed. But the cars had a lot to do with it.
Yeah, well, yes, but the more important thing is, Steve, when you think about it, that was more than 60 years ago.
Right.
What is Cuba like today? That's what we wanted to focus on this exhibit. That's kind of like, old history, and we are very aware of it.
And some of us are locked in that mindset.
Yes, and we're very aware of it. So we actually do provide some context, some historical context in the form of a beautiful film narrated by Soledad O'Brien.
The best.
That we produced especially for this exhibition. And that provides the historical context for the contemporary realities we want to focus on the rest of the exhibition.
By the way, how'd you get Soledad? Was one of our favorite guests here. She was part of this.
Well, we invited her to narrate this remarkable film, and she accepted, so we were thrilled.
And we 100% endorse people going over to the American Museum of Natural History to see the Cuba exhibit. And also, I want to make it clear, you're also the director of the Center for Biodiversity and Conservation. Doctor, I want to thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you for
You've enlightened us, and we need to understand more about Cuba, particularly today.
Come see the exhibit. Start there.
Thank you so much. That was
a pleasure.
Wonderful.
One-on-One with Steve Adubato has been a production of the Caucus Educational Corporation, celebrating over 25 years of broadcast excellence. This special edition of One-on-One with Steve Adubato is brought to you from the Tisch WNET studios at Lincoln Center. Funding has been provided by Bartley Healthcare, Felician University, Valley National Bank, ShopRite Supermarkets, Adler Aphasia Center, Gary's Wine and Marketplace, and by Josh S. Weston. Transportation provided by Airbrook Limousine, serving the metropolitan New York, New Jersey area.